where we provide 2 insights on go-to-market success in just 22 minutes. I'm the host of the show, Gary Schwacke. Each and every week, I host a conversation with an experienced professional who shares 2 insights and the stories behind them that they feel are critical to go-to-market success for growth companies. We will hear from executives and private equity investors with a variety of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. These professionals are working towards things with real-world constraints and challenges, just like you. If you are tired of marketing and sales hacking and want an authentic, practical guidance on go-to-market success, then this is the show for you. If you can't stick around for the live show, you can get recordings and highlights of all shows by subscribing to the review on our website, 2and22.com. Now, let's jump right into the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a cold version of 2 and 22. Very excited to have Dino Verrelli as our guest. So Dino, you may recall, was actually introduced to us by our prior guest, Brian Lively. And Dino and I have had a chance to connect since then. And I'm really excited to share this story that he's about to share with us. And it's a really interesting combination of moving from a for-profit world, or continuing to be in a for-profit world, and actually launching a nonprofit with a great purpose. So let's talk a little bit about Dino. So he is the CEO and founder of Project Purple, whose mission is to running to beat pancreatic cancer. Prior to that, to the founding of Project Purple, he actually started his own brokerage firm in the insurance space, and so brings both a for-profit and nonprofit experience. So without further ado, let's welcome Dino into the discussion.
Hey, Gary.
Dino, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got quite a collection of bibs behind you.
Yeah.
So given that this, you've been involved as part of the charity, we'll get to this at the end, but would love to hear the number of races that you've actually run. I'm sure it is staggering. So be thinking about that. But So tell us about your background. So very excited to hear about Project Purple, but let's go back even further to that, like that started the founding of your brokerage firm, what led to that and what you learned. And then we'll, of course, go into the Project Purple chapter.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start really right in college. So I played collegiate basketball at a small liberal arts school in Rhode Island, and never had a job in college. Usually,
you paid for it.
Yeah, I paid for it. I paid for it. Right? Like I paid for it in experience. So, now as a business owner, a CEO, we have interns that come in all the time. And so my experience was not like that. I didn't do anything in the summertime other than focus on basketball. And the end of my senior year, or going into the end of my senior year, I asked my coach, I said, hey, I took this investment class and I really loved investments. I said, do you have any connections? Because I need some real world experience. Wasn't going to go play professionally. And he said, yeah, I got an old teammate, good friend who's a member, actually works for Janney Montgomery Scott in Providence. And, but I said, I really want to be in Boston. Well, he's like, well, you'll connect with him. And then maybe he's got friends in the Boston area. That happened, ended up doing an internship at Janney Montgomery Scott in the summer of 1996. At the end of my graduation, moved up to Boston. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, was living in Boston. So I wanted to be with her. And I just fell in love with the investment world. As I said, I took a class, had this internship, realized that retail wasn't the thing for me, but the gentleman that I was interning for at the time at Janney said, maybe you should go into institutional sales. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more flexibility, a lot less stress. And so I started my career in the financial services industry that fall. And then fast forward to about 2004, 2005, had a great career working for 2 major insurance companies. And I think the entrepreneurial bug got into me. I was an entrepreneur. I've always considered myself an entrepreneur, going back to the days of high school when I had a paper route. If people who are listening remember, like there used to be people that and the funny thing about that, Gary, was just to talk about that for a second, it wasn't given to you. Like you had to bid on these paper routes back in the day. You're talking about in the mid 80s, like late 80s, mid 80s, where, you bid on someone else's paper route, or you had to go out and, schlep and start your own paper route, go out and get new customers. So I look back at that very beginning, of being an entrepreneur. And, I had spent my time in corporate America, built a very successful career, learned a lot from a lot of great people, a lot of great mentors. And a good friend of mine, who we actually started at the same company, same day. And we kind of went different paths, but we always stayed in touch, came to me in like late 2004 and said, hey, I have this idea, like, let's leave corporate America and let's start our own firm. And so we did that. In 2005, early 2005, we started Applegate Brokerage. And, we had such great experience in the corporate America atmosphere, but we just felt like we could do this better. There was always something that, I always had a challenge, when we would sit in these marketing meetings in corporate America, and, you have this person coming in and saying, oh, well, this is the way you should present this. But how many times have you been effective, in a live audience? And the answer would be like, well, no, but this is what the research shows us, and
right.
I always had issues with that. But so we launched, Applegate Brokerage in 2005 and started to really build on something really that, for a long time for me just became what I love to do. I loved helping investment advisors. We were the middlemen basically for, agents across the country with their life insurance annuity needs. And, we were working with, I think at the time, like 33 different insurance companies to sell new products through, these insurance agents. And life was really good. We grew our business to having 5 employees. We made some mistakes early on that we learned very quickly. I think as an entrepreneur, for those entrepreneurs listening and watching, it's kind of a little bit trial by error, right? Like you have to figure this out. And so, but you learn early on, and the idea is not to make those mistakes again, right? And so, things were good. Life was great. We had a great run. I think the one thing that I've always been really successful in doing is developing and cultivating relationships. And in whatever you do business-wise, it always comes down to those relationships, right? Like if you're selling, cars, you have great relationships with, certain individuals that come back year after year after year. And the same could be said, for us in the insurance business. We're really good at building relationships when we were in corporate America. Some of those did translate into when we started Applegate, which certainly did help, but we continued to build and grow and foster relationships with that. And so, things were great. 2008, the stock market crashed, for those that remember, but honestly, that did not impact us. The fixed instrument market, which is what life insurance and annuities really kind of are backed by, that wasn't really impacted for a couple years after. So, quite honestly, when the stock market started to crash, people were looking for safety. So our business kind of went in the other direction because we were selling a lot of fixed, safe investments. So it really was a great time for us in the business. But the one thing that happened in 2008 was late 2008, December 2008, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And that's kind of when things kind of turned a little bit for me. So my dad was diagnosed in December of 2008. And, at the time I had 5 employees. Business was good, as I said. And I made a conscious decision to kind of be there for my dad and my mom. My parents were immigrants. They gave my brother and I a great life. And my dad was my hero, my role model, and I wanted to be there for everything. So I made a conscious decision to kind of step away day to day, because I had really good staff and I knew they could manage things. They owned some of the relationships. And I was there for my dad during that time of him battling cancer. And being there all the time for everything, I noticed a lot. And I think maybe, again, just being the entrepreneur, like how do you build a better mousetrap, or how can we move things along? And in that instance, Gary, it was more like, all right, my dad is dying. in essence, like, how can I keep him alive? Like, what are the things I can do to help him? So initially that motivation was like, how do I save him? And, we started to dig into the space. You start to look in the disease. You start to look at the healthcare system. And we had access to great healthcare, but it wasn't perfect.
Right.
And so I started to realize these things. I started to run around the same time. I hated running before. Running became very therapeutic for me. It became very positive. At the time, I was just going out on 1 mile runs early in the morning because I had a young family at the time. And it just became very clear and these were the steps I should be taking. And so there were a couple of little things along that time frame from 2008, where my dad was originally diagnosed. He got a clearance of no evidence of disease or no evidence of cancer for about 6 months, but then got re-diagnosed in March of 2010. And at that time, he was stage 4, and they gave him 6 months to live in March of 2010. So that's when I think the entrepreneurial juices and the collective, everything that I was gathering through this time really started to go into warp speed. And then when I decided, like, hey, I want to do something about this. I think we need to start a charity and help my dad, initially, but also help other people. And so that's when, we really started to move, kind of action, get people engaged, start to form a board. And we did that in September of 2010. Officially, September of 2010 is our incorporation date.
Yeah.
And I knew, for me, again, being an entrepreneur, I looked at the space. No one was really using running. Running was so good to me at the time. My mom's a 2-time breast cancer survivor now. And at the time, we had done some stuff with Susan G. Komen. So I think we had gotten something in the mail at the house. And I saw, like, wow, they're raising all this money doing running. And, there were a couple other little things along the way. Meb Keflezighi, was one of the inspiration points. He won the New York City Marathon in 2009. That enhanced, I think, my running, hearing his story about, his parents immigrating. There were parallels to my story.
An awesome human being too.
Yeah. Unbelievable, right? And then you realize, and that was really like my first experience, was like, wow, there's charity runners in these races. Like, I was like, wow, like, there's an opportunity here. And initially, if you were a fly on the wall in 2010 at our first board meeting, marathon, we weren't even thinking about it. I actually remember saying, like, hey, we would never do a marathon. We're going to do 5Ks and half marathons. And then, these opportunities presented itself, along this journey. So we incorporated and started in that August or September of 2010. We based a lot around running. That was really a core foundation for us. We wanted to help patients. We wanted to fund research because, back then I knew early on, like, we had to do 2 things. We had to raise a lot of money because the disease is very underfunded. It's one of the most underfunded diseases in the country.
Right.
And then also raise a lot of awareness. So how do we do that? We've got to do some crazy things. And I don't mean crazy, like, but just, we really have to amplify that message in a large setting. And how can we do that?
Yep.
And so we just literally started running, and, it started out as running local races, and then eventually moved on to the marathons. I was blessed with the opportunity in 2013 2012 to run the Boston Marathon. I got a number 7 days before.
Wow.
I had never run past 14 miles up until that day.
Oh,
every mile I set a milestone. Yeah. And if we look back, that was the hottest Boston Marathon on record. I think it's still the record. Nice. So that experience, and I'll share this story, and this is when the light bulb went off. This was a light bulb moment for me. Was I got a charity number, and we were all the way in the back. Like, I was like the last person that crossed that start line that morning, I think. And this guy ran by me. He was blind. He was about 6'5" and about 280 pounds, and he blew by me with his guide. And to me, that's one of the light bulbs that went off and said, oh my God, anyone can do this.
Yeah.
Here's a guy. And I guarantee that day he blew my time out of the water. you
Right.
know, I just realized that regardless, you know, and at that time I didn't consider myself a runner, and I don't really consider myself a runner now, but I think I know a lot more, that the fact that anyone can do something great if they put their mind to it. And especially with endurance events, you know, I've seen people, you know, I was in the Marine Corps marathon a couple years later, and there was a guy, you know, I hit a wall, if runners know that wall, at like mile 23, and a guy with one arm and three prosthetics, he had an arm prosthetic and two leg prosthetics, is going by me, you know, at mile 23. And I was like, I can't, you know, it's so inspirational, but I said to myself, I'm fully bodied. Like, how can this guy beat me? Like, I've got to pick it up, right? I got to get through this wall. So I've just, you know, the point was, back in that 2012 moment, was like, I realized, like, wow, anyone can do this. So, you know, we can inspire anyone to run for our mission. And so, you know, fast forward to where we were prior to the pandemic, you know, we were involved in 15 races nationally. We rolled out a fitness program 5 years ago into what started into the CrossFit community. Then it quickly expanded into the brick and mortar gyms. And we started doing our own walks about 5 years ago as well, in key select markets. And so I like to use the term anything endurance related, we got involved, because I always felt, you know, going back to that first idea of going out on a run early in the morning for a mile and having that endorphin rush, and just the clairvoyant, you know, thinking and having something really positive. This is such a negative disease, and so many families go through what I went through. To have something super positive to look forward to have people, you know, get healthy to run these events and to be involved and to have all those things happen to them, it far, you know, exceeds, you know, the ugliness of the disease, and gives them hope and helps other people and helps themselves in doing so.
Yeah. So 10 years, first of all, congratulations, right? You just passed 10 years. That's incredible. And what a journey. You've got your, you know, your quote unquote day job that's still going. And then you've got the launch and growth of a 10-year run on this charity as well. So you have a unique role with a foot in both docks, so to speak, or, you know, both lands. What are the two common things that you saw that led to success as you think about quote unquote go to market, right? You're launching a charity, and the way that you are able to execute on your mission is to be successful, right? To go to market, to create a brand, to create awareness, and in some cases a harder sell, because you're asking people to donate time, energy, money to a cause, and that they're not getting a widget back, or a service back, or what have you. So what are the two common things that stuck out to you as you've been down that path?
Yeah. So I think the first one is, you know, ideas are cheap, and it's how you execute, right? It's not about the idea, it's how you execute. And so, you know, if I look back, like selling life insurance or selling an annuity, you know, anyone can do that, but how you execute that, how you make that, you know, when we were doing life insurance, you know, we had rate sheets, you know, and rate sheets are critical, right? Like, if you're the investment advisor, you want the most updated information. So we had an app on the web. You could download it on your smartphone that gave you the up-to-date rate information. That is super critical. And, you know, I knew when agents called our office, you know, they would get, you know, the right execution. They would get a certain level of customer service to execute that sale. And so now we look at that from the nonprofit side, same experience, right? Like, someone wants to run that New York City marathon, you know, the marathon is the rate, right, that they're getting into that race, but how we execute, how we work with them to make sure they have a great experience. We are the fundraising experts. So teaching them how to fundraise, making sure they have a great experience, making sure they're fully trained, and making sure they know they're helping to support, and we are getting return on that investment with our research and our patients, and helping them That is really how to execute, right? Versus just saying, hey, give us your money and then, okay, go run the race and, we'll see you at the finish line.
Right.
So it's really about, how you execute on those ideas. And I know I use the marathon as an example, but even like, now in the pandemic, a virtual setting, like everything's virtual, but, and that's not, no one has a patent on running a virtual event, whether it's a 5K or a gala, but how are you executing to that? How are you making sure you're communicating properly with those participants? How are you, making sure that you're recognizing, time winners potentially if you have a 5K because you have a time component to it, if you have people that are getting involved and engaged, so it's really, the first point is it's not about the ideas, but it's about how you execute that.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the entire experience, right? I mean, it's yeah, I'm kind of doing this, but the devil's in the details, and it's the alignment of all of those components to deliver on it is where the secret sauce is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the second part, which kind of falls right in this, is it's not rocket science, but there is a science to this, right? There is timing that I think has to be considered in terms of when, like, back to the life insurance business, when rates change, you've got to be Johnny on the spot to make sure that people are aware that these rates are changing, to take advantage of it, because you've got kind of a short window. Same thing with events, how you launch events and how you communicate, there is a science to that. Some people, love, the interaction, whether it's on Zoom now or phone calls.
Yeah.
People like emails. Some people, are on social media. So, how you execute, those ideas, but the science behind how to do that, again, this is not rocket science, but there is a science to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. We, it's, I love that point. I mean, at Yield, we harp on that all the time, which is companies, almost because of all of the technology and data that's available to them, there is for some reason this tendency to want to overcomplicate the process. And the reality is we're so focused on, it's just about two things, the fundamentals, but alignment of the fundamentals. And that really goes to your 2 points, right? Which is it isn't rocket science. There are probably some cases where there literally is rocket science involved. Yeah. But for the most part, it is really thoroughly understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then aligning all of those things and thinking through the entire. And that's your point about execution. Is don't overthink it. Well, believe it or not, that 22 minutes went really, really fast. But that was such an awesome story, Dino, and I appreciate it. So, tell us a little bit for people that want to learn more about Project Purple or about Dino or about the number of races that you've run. Where would we go to find that out?
Well, the easy one is Project Purple. So to learn more about Project Purple, projectpurple.org, O-R-G. We're on all social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're even on YouTube, and we also run a podcast. So wherever you listen to podcasts, we have a weekly podcast with many people from all walks of life talking about their journey with pancreatic cancer. And occasionally we'll get a celebrity to jump in or an athlete to talk about, their involvement and some inspiration about what they're doing. In terms of me, I'm, you can Google it. It's a pretty uncommon name. So if you Google Dino Verrelli, I'm pretty active on Instagram as a public profile, as well as Twitter. And, in terms of races, Gary, I've been thinking about that the whole time. I've done marathons. I know I've done 10 marathons because I just did New York in 19, and that was my 10th.
Wow.
In terms of half marathons, I don't know. I'm not even going to throw out a number because then I don't want someone to call me out on Athlinks that says like, hey, I see you.
That's right.
I've done a lot. As clearly the board behind us shows. So I don't even, it's got to be well over 100, maybe 200, 300. I don't know.
Man, well, here's to another 10 years. Keep it up. We're everybody's rooting for you. Thank you for sharing the inspiration. And then let's just wrap here with a quick reminder on Dino's 2 insights to go-to-market success. One is it's really an execution, all about execution. And we've heard that before from others, but in this case, it's really unique as we think about this applies in so many cases in both for-profit, nonprofit, so critical as we think about execution. And related to that, it's not rocket science. Like, don't think so hard about overcomplicating and think about more about the key components, maniacally execute those, make sure that they're aligned, and the results will follow. So, Dino, really appreciate it. Have a fabulous holidays, continued health and happiness to you and your family, and really appreciate you taking the time to spend some time with us.
Appreciate it, Gary. Thank you. Have a great holiday.
Yes, you too. Well, that was wonderful. Dino is just a pure energy, and you can see the optimism that exudes from him, and so thankful he was able to spend some time with us. So happy holidays to everybody. I really appreciate your time, and have a great week. Life is moving fast, so if you missed the live show of 2 in 22, you can get the video recording and highlights by subscribing at 2in22.com. You can also get the audio version by subscribing to the 2 in 22 podcast on your favorite platform. Thanks for spending time with us.